What are three interesting factors about yourself that other audiences don't know about you?
I've never thought of myself as a persistent person, someone who doggedly sticks at a task. My father would have said, I think, when I was a child, that I was a quitter. When the going gets tough, he said, you walk off the field. I've spent my life living that assessment down. My partner, Susie, is convinced I am a perfectionist. So in some measure, maybe I've countered that early damnation. I am forever torn between my scientific background as a geologist, a biologist, and an engineer by training, and this almost consuming desire to create pictures in paint and words. I'll cry with Leonard Cohen's poetry and songs one minute, and then I'll admonish those about me for lack of logic, scientific rigour, or due process the next. It can be confusing for those about me, but I think it means there's an extra dimension in my work. Some days, I don't know how I live with myself. My life has been one of good fortune, circumstances that have allowed me to live in a prosperous time, in a prosperous country, with access to education, in a caring society. Just a short time working in South Asia, in Bangladesh, in fact, gave me a heightened appreciation not only of my own good fortune, but that materiality is so short term. Some of the happiest people in the world have very little. They should have more and deserve more from this world. More opportunity, more of this world's resources. But easy for me to say, I guess, there are no pockets in shrouds. We enter and leave with nothing. In between, there's the love of our families and those dear to us. That is what matters. I am in awe of the Bangladeshis' capacity for positivity. It just seems the more we have, the unhappier we become, the more we want. I try to transcend that point of view, not too successfully at times, but I do try.
When did you first realise you wanted to be a writer?
I was in my 5th grade of primary school. Two things happened. Two things that have guided me through my scientific career and out the back of it to a concentration on the creative arts. The first was a teacher's request for somebody to draw a picture of Santa Claus on the blackboard, a picture for the end of term celebrations. The other was an essay competition. Both were beyond me at the time. My mother came to the rescue, an intensely artistic person. She led me through both with incredible patience. Since that time, I've always had a brush in my hand, and creative writing had to wait. The lure of money and scientific business writing, corporate speak, held sway for many years, but I've always turned story ideas through my head. Now it's a reality.
What inspired you to write a book?
My grandfather was a veteran of the First World War. He left for Palestine a fit, positive young man. He returned something else. He was forever positive, though, maintained a sense of humour, but everything went wrong for him in the subsequent years. I started the journey to this first book, The Veiled Thread, reading my grandfather's reminiscences. He wrote a series of tales that were never published, and in those stories he revealed something of himself, but not enough. I needed to examine the root cause of his failures, his missteps, so I invented the characters you see in The Veiled Thread. And curiously, the further I delved into their lives, the more the notion of inherited trauma crystallised as a major driving force for us all. The story is incomplete in this first volume. It transcends any one group of humanity. It's pervasive throughout all our lives.
Was the character inspired by a real person? If so, who?
As I indicated previously, my grandfather provided the image, as it were, the set of circumstances around which I wove the fiction. And I guess the modern day narrative draws significantly from my own life, though for dramatic purposes, Harry's issues are not my own.
When did you write your first book and how old were you?
I guess I'm a late starter in the business of book writing. I've painted all my life, but it wasn't until I was forced to temporarily cease work, forced not so much as I wanted to, my wife became very ill, that I decided to broaden my creativity and write. I'd always wanted to write a fictional novel. My first attempt turned out to be unpublishable, but it gave me the impetus to get it right. And with the help of a very special editor, Janet Blagg, I leapt upon the road of purposeful fictional writing. I was in my 50s before the momentum of writing took over. Now, to ensure that my art gets look in, I concentrate on one or the other in 2-week blocks. It never requires so much discipline, and that discipline sometimes fails me.
Good. What do you like to do when you're not writing?
I try to devote some time each day either to writing or thinking purposefully about the next steps in the narrative. But when the ocean swell is right, I head for my favourite break, Yallingup, in the far southwest of Western Australia, usually by mid-morning, and get a fix, a dose of freedom, the power of the ocean. And that wonderful feeling as the wave gives you a boot up the bum and you hurtle forward into the unknown. It's something I've done for many years. I enjoy the challenge of taking on the power of the ocean.
What was one of the most surprising things you learned in creating your book?
No matter how much I plan my writing, pages of outline, scene by scene, at some point, the characters take charge. They develop a life of their own. They dictate what happens next. So the plan, at one point or another, is abandoned as the characters chart their own course through the labyrinth of their lives. I do force myself occasionally back to the original plan, maybe at critical points, but it doesn't take long for the characters to head again in their own direction. The big surprise, I guess, is how alive these people are, how vibrant they are in my mind and on the pages of the book. I hope the reader feels the same way.
How many books have you written?
This is my first book, this first real book, though I have others that I probably should never release. They shall remain hidden examples of a writer's learning his craft. But the future is something different. I'm bursting with stories. I have another 2 in the immediate pipeline, the second in this trilogy, as a teaser at the back of the veiled thread. Next one is.
What do you think makes a good story?
I believe that for a tale to be engaging, it has to have resonance with the audience. The readers need to identify either with the characters, the place, or the language. There has to be a reason for the story, a reason that the audience needs to discover through the narrative. And my style is not to over-describe. Let the reader form the images appropriate to them. Anyone Everyone has a different way of imaging the words that are placed on the page. It's a shame to divert imagination to a static view. So I don't go on and on.
As a child, what did you want to do when you grew up?
As a child, much to my father's frustration, I just wanted to be a child. I lived in the moment, got myself in strife constantly, had little concept of the consequences. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I suddenly realised that geology could offer an understanding of this planet, our history, that no other discipline could fathom. The true story of us all is written in the rocks of the planet Earth. Thinking back, I guess, I always knew that. I was always either dashing myself against the rocks or throwing them.
Do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people will find?
My books are a jigsaw puzzle. The reader needs to piece together the small clues, turn over the rocks, examine the characters. It's all there to see. Nothing is specifically hidden. It's just that in life, we all tend to point ourselves in familiar directions. That limited view can lead us in wrong directions, down blind alleys. No, nothing is hidden. There are no secrets in my books. Rather, everything is hidden in plain sight.
How long did it take you to write your first novel?
The Veiled Thread was written in a little over 12 months, though I did have a body of research already completed for my first, now shelved, 200,000 word tome. Unpublishable, but full of the basis for The Veiled Thread. It was a time for dedication and persistence. My partner Susie transferred sustenance across the gap to my studio as the chapters rolled by, my head down into the wee small hours. It had to be written.
What advice would you give to aspiring authors?
If you have something to say it. If you have a story to tell it. Find an established author you admire, a style that resonates with you, use it as a guide, but put your stamp onto it. Nothing is new under the sun, but what's in your mind, your set of experiences, these are yours. Get them out. Just write. Refinement comes later. You don't start with a refined product. If you go that way, it's a recipe for never finishing. And persistence. By that I mean have a plan, have discipline, have an end point firmly in your mind, and above all, believe in yourself.